The rain tapped lightly on the window glass, marking the beginning of an ordinary day. A day like so many others, except for a feeling that was hard to explain. Juanita woke up before the alarm, as she always did. Her body already knew there was little to expect from the hours that would follow. There were no more children at home. No meetings. No commitments. Just silence. She put on a gray robe, placed her bare feet on the cold wooden floor, and walked to the kitchen. The coffee was already ready. She programmed the coffee maker every night, a habit she kept from marriage. Even after the divorce, she sat at the table with the mug in her hands. Steam rose and dissipated in the air like smoke from memories that insisted on returning. On top of the table, an old newspaper. She didn't read it. She just opened it. Not because of the news, but because of an old photo folded between the pages. She already knew which one it was. No doubt. She already knew which one it was. It was a photograph from 1991. Chicago. Michael, her, and their two older children. He was smiling. A rare smile. Sincere, tired, but full of love. A love that no one else could see. Juanita ran her fingers over the image with an almost sacred delicacy. She touched his face in the photo like someone searching for warmth, where there was only paper. And there, alone, on an ordinary morning, she murmured to no one, "I shouldn't have kept this," but she didn't get up to throw it away. On the living room shelf there was a wooden box with a golden latch. There were the things she never had the courage to get rid of. And that day, perhaps because the sky was gray like she felt inside, Juanita decided to open it. Inside, there were 3 letters, all handwritten. None signed with the full name. Just an M at the end. She opened the first one. It was from 1987, written before the wedding. "I don't know if I'll be able to be the man you deserve. I only know that when you enter the room, the rest of the world disappears. And I wanted to live in that silence with you." Juanita closed her eyes. She remembered that paper, the night she received it, the way he handed it over, without the courage to say it out loud. The second letter was from 1993, when he had lost his father and temporarily retired from basketball. "I know I'm here, but my head is somewhere else. Thank you for not trying to fix me. I don't know how to love right now, but I keep choosing you." She cried at that time. She cried again now, but it was the third letter that she avoided for years. Written in 2005, a few months before the divorce was signed. "I didn't leave you. I left what I had become, but there's a part of me that never left this house." She folded the paper carefully, as if touch could wear it down more than time already had. And then she asked herself, for the 1000th time, why did she never forget him? It wasn't because of the name, nor the fame. It was because of what no one saw. Because of the way he put his hand on her shoulder when he wanted to say, "Thank you," without words. Because of how he listened to the children talking in the back seat and smiled without turning his face. Because of how he played piano, alone, in the early morning hours, even out of tune, just because it calmed his anxiety before a game. It was because of that. Because, deep down, Michael Jordan was human with her in a way he never could be with the world. She got up, wiped her tears with an old dish towel, and went to the living room. The landline phone rang. Yes, she still used a landline, not out of necessity, but because he liked the idea of being able to call home and hear her voice in the background. Even if just for a second. She answered, "Hello?" It was Marcus, the middle child. "Mom?" "Hi, son. Everything okay?" She recognized the careful tone. He knew, just a little nostalgic, dear. Nothing serious. "You thought about Dad again?" She smiled sadly. "I don't need to think, Marcus. He never left me." After the phone call, Juanita walked to the backyard. The plants were well cared for. She made sure of that. Taking care of the small life around helped silence the hole his absence left. While watering the flowers, she remembered an old scene. It was 1996. She had the flu, lying on the couch, and Michael had canceled a dinner with sponsors to stay home. She saw him peeling oranges and bringing them on a tray. He didn't say anything, but he sat on the floor, next to her, just to hear her breathing. That night, he wasn't an idol. He wasn't a millionaire. He wasn't a legend. He was just a man, a husband, a possible love, and that was all she needed to remember for the tears to return. Not from pain, but from a presence that, although absent, still cast shadows in the corners of the house. The sun began to hide. She went back inside, made tea, sat in the old armchair in the living room, the one he had made to measure, and stayed there, in silence, feeling, allowing herself to remember without rush. And then, she whispered softly, "If someone asks me why I never forgot you, I'll say that you were the only place where I was whole." Night came slowly. The sky wore a dense blue without stars, as if even it carried the absence of something. Juanita turned off the television, without paying attention to what was on. It was on just for the noise, anything, to not hear the sound that always accompanied her since the divorce, the sound of an empty house. She climbed the stairs with light steps, like someone carrying memories on their shoulders. The room remained the same. Light blankets, dark wood headboard, a lamp on the left that she rarely lit. It was his side. She sat on the edge of the bed, her gaze fixed on the wall, but her mind far, very far away. There was a time when that room was their refuge. The only place where Michael didn't need to pretend he was indestructible, where he let his shoulders drop, where he didn't need to smile for anyone. There, he was just himself, and with her, that was enough. Juanita remembered the way he arrived late at night, exhausted, after a game, his feet hurting, his hands marked. She helped him take off his shoes, without saying a word. She put the wet towel on his forehead and stayed there, beside him, in silence. He didn't like to talk about the pressure, about the fear of failing, but she saw in his eyes when he looked at the sleeping children and whispered, "I wish they knew that even when I make mistakes, it's for them that I try to get it right." Michael was a man of few words, but of deep gestures. Juanita lay down on the bed. She looked at the ceiling. She didn't want to sleep, because when she slept, sometimes she dreamed of him, and in dreams, he still came back. Sometimes he was young, still with the sparkle in his eyes. Other times, he was like in the last years, more contained, more mature, but in all dreams, he came, and always said something simple, almost whispered, "It's still you." She always woke up with tears in her eyes, but with a warm chest. As if the dream was more real than any other relationship she had after him, because yes, there were others. 2 men with whom she tried to build something. A short marriage, a long relationship, but none of them knew how to deal with the shadow Michael left. It wasn't a comparison of fame, money, status. It was something else. It was the way Michael made her feel seen. The others complimented her clothes, her hair, her intelligence. Michael, on the other hand, noticed when she was silent for more than 2 days. He asked, "You're hiding something behind that beautiful silence, aren't you?" And she would break down, because he knew how to read what she hid, even from herself. On the bedroom bookshelf, there was a book of poems by Pablo Neruda. She opened it at random. A bookmark from forgotten pages led her to an underlined verse. "I love you without knowing how, or when, or from where. I love you simply, without problems or pride. Thus I love you because I don't know how to love in any other way." She smiled sadly. It was he who gave her that book, on an ordinary morning. No special date, no specific reason, simply because he had underlined that passage and said, "This, here, is how I love you. I just don't know how to show it without losing myself." At the time, she didn't understand the depth of that. Today, she understood. Loving a man like Michael Jordan was an impossible equation. It was dividing herself between being a wife and being invisible, between being beside him and, at the same time, making room for him to belong to everyone. He never betrayed her in the vulgar way, but he betrayed her with absences that hurt more than any physical infidelity. His betrayal was looking out the bedroom window, on her birthday, and whispering on the phone with a businessman about the new campaign. It was being present in body, but with mind far away. She learned to accept this, out of love, out of faith, out of believing that one day he would come back whole. But he never came back. It was she who asked for the divorce, not because she stopped loving him, but because she realized that loving alone was also a form of abandonment. Michael tried to convince her. With silence, with gifts, with vague promises, but never with words. And that's what hurt most. She didn't want grand gestures. She just wanted to hear, "I miss you. I was wrong. Stay." But he never said it. And then, she left. Years passed. And even after so much time, even with the grown children, with life stabilized, with her name away from headlines, his name still echoed in the corridors of the house. In the pictures, in the letters, in the lamp on the left side, in the silent night, Juanita sat on the porch, with a blanket on her shoulders. She looked at the sky. She remembered the day he proposed to her. It wasn't anything cinematic. They were washing dishes. Yes, dishes. And he, with wet hands, looked at her and said, "I feel at peace when I'm with you, and I've never felt at peace with anyone. So, marry me?" She laughed, thinking it was a joke, but he didn't smile. "I'm serious," Juanita accepted. Because at that moment, in that place, she knew that even the greatest of all still wanted a home. And, for a time, she was that home. The wind blew stronger. She pulled the blanket more tightly and whispered to the sky, "You left before understanding what it meant to stay." And she cried, but not like before. Not from revolt, not from raw sadness. She cried like someone who finally accepts. Some loves aren't meant to last, but are impossible to forget. The next morning, the sun entered through the curtain cracks like a silent visitor. Juanita woke up with dry eyes and a tired body as if she had crossed a continent during the night. Even without leaving the bed, it took a few minutes to find the strength to get up. She walked to the bathroom, washed her face, tied her hair in a loose bun, and went down the stairs with dragging steps. It was Saturday. Nothing new, but something bothered her. There was a strange weight in the air, as if something was about to emerge from those walls. A secret? An old echo? She couldn't say. While preparing coffee, her eyes landed on the living room shelf. It wasn't the first time she looked at it. But there was something different now. The third book in the bottom row was crooked, slightly tilted, as if someone had pulled it recently. But no one besides her had touched that shelf for years. She approached. It was a hardcover book, about Italian architecture, one of those Michael brought from a trip to Tuscany in 1999. He said, at the time, that he wanted to build a summer house inspired by those old villas. He never built it. Juanita removed the book from the shelf. It fell into her hands easily, as if it wanted to be opened. And, between the central pages, an envelope slipped out. It was yellow, aged by time, closed, and with handwriting she would recognize, even in the dark. Michael's handwriting. Without hesitating, she sat in the armchair and breathed deeply before opening. There was a ceremonious air to that gesture, as if she was about to open something sacred. Inside the envelope, a single folded sheet. No date, no addressee, just words. "Sometimes I keep thinking about what it would be like if I just dropped everything. If I abandoned the noise, the spotlights, the contracts, the flights. If I went back to that first house of ours and said, 'Do you still want this tired man?' Because, of all the places I've been, none was more mine than the silence beside you. I miss even the arguments. Because in your words, even what was anger was still love. I don't know if you'll read this someday, but if you do, know that there was a version of me that never left your embrace." Juanita's hands trembled. She reread it 3 times. She didn't cry. Not yet. The shock was greater than any emotion. She leaned her head against the back of the armchair and closed her eyes. Memory ran like a movie the exact day he returned from Italy with that book in his hands. "I brought a gift," he said. She laughed. "A book about houses? Beautiful houses. That remind me of you." "Why?" "Because they have silence and permanence." At the time, she didn't understand. Now, everything made sense. The phone rang. She answered with her voice still choked. Hello? It was Jasmine, her daughter. Mom? Is everything okay? Juanita hesitated. She didn't want to seem fragile, but she also couldn't pretend. I found a letter from your father. Silence on the other side. He wrote to you? I think so. Or maybe he wrote to himself. And what did it say? Juanita closed her eyes, trying to summarize. That. Deep down, he never really left. Jasmine breathed deeply. I always thought that. What do you mean? The way he talked about you. It was different. He never said much. Jasmine. Exactly. It was the only subject he stayed silent about. Juanita didn't respond. She swallowed hard. She kept the words. Do you want me to come over later? No, daughter. I want to be with myself today. That same day, at dusk, she went to the basement. It had been years since she went down there. Among boxes, old suitcases, children's toys, and unused appliances, there was a large box with faded labels. She pulled it. Inside, photos, letters, old shirts, shoes, pieces he always left for when he came to spend some time. She found a cap, that black one, with the number 23 embroidered in white, and, inside it, folded, a small paper written in pen. Don't forget me. It was his handwriting again. Juanita knelt, with the cap in her hands, and finally allowed herself to break down. She cried, without rush, without censure. The house was silent, but now the silence was different. It was no longer absence. It was presence. He was there, in everything, not as someone who stayed, but as someone who, even without knowing, planted invisible roots in the deepest spaces of her heart. And that's why she thought she never managed to forget him. The cap was still in her hands, folded between her fingers as if it had been delivered just a few minutes ago, not 20 years ago. The phrase inside it, "Don't forget me," reverberated in Juanita's chest, like an echo of everything she tried to bury. She was sitting on the basement floor, surrounded by boxes, memories, fabrics, with the smell of the past. The old wood creaked under her knees, but she didn't move. She wasn't in a hurry. For the first time, she allowed herself to look at that love without the filter of reason, without the shield of hurt. And, suddenly, the question arose like a cutting breeze. What if he also never forgot me? She never thought about this seriously. She always assumed his silence was indifference, that absence was abandonment, that the world had seduced him completely, and that she no longer fit there. But what if? Not. What if, behind the cold interviews, the impeccable posture, the million-dollar contracts, he still kept the same mental portrait she maintained of him, that one from 1989. Him, in shorts and tank top, sitting on the living room floor, with one of the babies in his lap, reading a book out loud, and laughing alone at his own mispronounced words. Michael was a stage man, yes, but he was also a couch man, a Sunday man, a tea with cookies made in secret man, and she saw all of that. She was the only one who saw that whole side. Later, back in the living room, Juanita lit the lamp on the left side of the bed for the first time in years. She didn't know why, maybe because that was his side. And because, in a way, she was ready for him to be there again, even if only in thought. She sat at the desk and took a blank sheet. She began to write, "If you ever find this letter, I want you to know that I saw you. I saw you beyond shirt number 23, beyond the screams, the crowd, the cameras. I saw you when you didn't know how to be seen. I saw your sadness, your hunger for peace, your fear of not being able to handle it. And even when you fell silent, I understood." The words flowed from her chest, not her mind. She continued, "You don't owe me anything, but if you ever thought about coming back, even if only in thought, know that you never needed to ask for forgiveness. What we had was so real that not even time had the courage to erase it." She signed with the initials he used for her, J.V. She folded the letter. She didn't know where to keep it. Then, she went back to the cap. She unfolded it carefully, put the letter inside, and returned it to the box. She closed it, but this time, with a slight smile. The next day, she woke up lighter. She made her tea, opened the windows. The sun rays entered as if they knew the climate inside her had changed. While washing dishes, she listened to the playlist she used to play on family Sundays. When As, by Stevie Wonder started playing, she stopped what she was doing. She rested her hands on the sink, closed her eyes. As around the sun, the earth knows she's revolving, and the rosebuds know to bloom in early May. He loved that song. He always said the chorus was how he felt about her. I'll be loving you always. He would hum badly and off rhythm, but full of soul, and she would laugh, even pretending she was annoyed. Now, there, alone in the kitchen, Juanita was dancing, slowly, barefoot, turning delicately, as if she were in his arms. She wasn't sad. For the first time in years, she felt gratitude, because, despite everything, despite the pain, the distance, the choices, love existed, and still existed in the form of memory, gesture, music. In the late afternoon, she opened the mailbox. At the bottom, among bills and catalogs, there was an envelope without a sender. She widened her eyes. The paper was thick. The handwriting, familiar. She ran up the stairs, sat at the table, opened with trembling hands. Inside, just one sheet, few words. If you still see me, even if only in dreams, then maybe I never really left. She leaned her head against the chair, letting silent tears fall. Maybe the world had lost Michael Jordan to the titles, but she had known the man, and that man still lived in her. Juanita spent the morning organizing the guest room closet, something she had been putting off for weeks. That tidying wasn't urgent, it was refuge. When emotions accumulated too much, she put her hands in motion. Folding, storing, classifying was like finding order in the middle of turmoil. Among blankets and old document boxes, she found a blue folder she hadn't seen since the 2000s. She opened it, with some care. There were some yellowed papers, old bank statements, purchase and sale contracts. But, underneath everything, almost forgotten, there was a cassette tape case. She stopped. The case was black, with the name Winter House. 1994, written in silver marker. Her breathing caught in her chest. The Winter House. A cabin in Utah where they spent a few quiet days when the children were still small. No press, no schedule, no basketball. She remembered that trip as if it were yesterday. Snow falling outside. Fireplace lit. The boys playing, making snow angels, and Michael cooking a simple dinner. Something very rare. He insisted on recording that moment with an old portable recorder. He said he wanted to have proof that he also knew how to make rice. Juanita went down the stairs with the tape in her hands, in silence. She opened the living room cabinet where she still kept an old sound system. She turned it on, put in the tape, pressed play. The initial hiss of the cassette filled the room. And then, his voice. Is it recording? I think it is. Well, if someone hears this in the future, let it be clear. Yes, Michael Jordan knows how to fry an egg. She smiled. Even alone, she let out a laugh with sound. Her heart tight, but alive. And now, attention. The most beautiful woman in the house is here beside me. Juanita, say hi. A silence. And then, her voice, shy and amused, recorded in time. Hi. But I'm only here because you promised to wash the dishes. That's slander. It's all recorded, Michael. Damn. Cut that out later, please. She covered her mouth with her hand, holding back tears. The sound of his laughter invaded the environment. It wasn't the public laugh that measured and controlled one. It was the other one, the real one, disarmed, intimate, only hers. The recorder continued. Okay. Pause the foolishness. I just want to leave it on record that this is one of the calmest days of my life. And that, if I ever get lost in the middle of the world, I hope someone brings me back to this place, to this sound, to this woman who's looking at me now as if I were just the father of her children. And maybe that's exactly what I wanted to be. She couldn't hold it. The tears came hot and sincere. For the first time, She heard him say what he never managed to say in words while they were together. That tape was the confession she waited for years. And it came late. But it came. The sound of the tape continued. Jay, if you hear this someday, and I'm distant by choice or by mistake, remember that this here is me. The me without crowds, without contracts. Just me. With you. With the boys. With burnt rice and cold feet. The silence came next. The tape continued spinning for a few seconds, until it stopped automatically. Juanita sat there for a while, without moving. The afternoon sun entered through the windows, gilding the living room floor, as if time had stopped, just to let her live that moment completely. Later, she put the tape back in the case. She didn't return it to the folder. She kept it inside her bedroom dresser, along with her most intimate belongings. Next to the letter, the cap, the memories that now no longer hurt, like before because they had been validated. She wasn't crazy, nor needy, nor too nostalgic. She had just been the only one to see the man behind the idol, and now, he himself confirmed this with his own voice. That night, before sleeping, Juanita did something she hadn't done in a long time. She took a sheet of paper and began to write. You're not here anymore, but I keep hearing your voice. In the tape's hiss, in the silence of the house, in the breathing between one memory and another. She folded the letter, put it in the same envelope as the previous one, next to the cap. She closed the box carefully, and for the first time, she didn't feel the need to reopen it for a good while. She was, finally, at peace with the idea that she didn't need to forget, because loving, sometimes, is accepting the permanence of someone who never really left. It was late afternoon when Juanita parked the car in front of the old training gym on the outskirts of Chicago. The place had been deactivated for years, now surrounded by fences and with part of the facade peeling from time. But she knew what that place still kept. The sound of his steps echoing on the wooden floor, the smell of sweat and concentration, the early mornings when he trained alone to silence the voices that said it was time to stop. She got out slowly, with her coat tight against her chest, as if protecting herself from a still-living memory. It had been almost 20 years since she last returned there, but that space carried something that no luxurious house, no mansion or five-star hotel managed to erase. There, Michael wasn't the icon. He was the man who sweated from fear of failing. The one who arrived before everyone else. The one who sometimes took her along, just to hear the sound of the ball bouncing in silence. She walked along the side of the building. The door was locked, but an opening in the iron gate allowed passage. She hesitated for a moment, not from fear, but from respect. That place was almost a sanctuary. She entered. The smell of wet wood and dust took the air. The windows were dirty, but still let in a golden beam of light. In the center of the court, the painted circle still resisted, faded. She approached, stopping exactly where he used to stand, breathing deeply before each free throw. She closed her eyes, and in that moment, she heard the sound that only she knew, the sound of his breathing. Slow, focused, and the whispers he said to himself, believing no one heard. You can do it. Just one more. Do it for them. Juanita opened her eyes. The tears were already there. She remembered when he took her to watch his private training. When he threw the ball against the wall and said, "This is my way of thinking." She laughed, thinking, yeah, when I play, everything gets organized. Now, alone in that empty place, she whispered, and when you stopped playing, where did everything you didn't know how to say go? No one answered, but she felt the answer inside her chest. In the corner of the court, where there was an equipment locker, something caught her attention. It was a wooden box, with his name carved rustically, MJ23. It was dusty. She crouched down, cleaned the lid, opened it carefully. Inside, a pair of worn sneakers, white with red details, from the model he used in 1996 training, and, between the two shoes, folded with military precision, a small paper. Of all the places where I was better, none was as mine as this one here, and none as safe as her eyes. Juanita felt the impact like a blow to the chest. That note wasn't about basketball. It was about her, about the only place where he, perhaps, didn't feel he needed to be perfect. She took the paper and held it with both hands. Outside, the sun was setting. The golden light crossed through the broken stained glass and painted the court orange, as if the scene was being lit by an invisible movie director. She walked to the center again, looked up, and, in a low voice, said, "You were always trying to tell me." But the world screamed louder. She closed her eyes. "I saw, Michael, even when you didn't know how to show." And there, in that abandoned gym, between echoes of steps and faded walls, Juanita finally understood. She didn't love him for who the world said he was. She loved him for who he only had the courage to be when he was alone. And, somehow, she was always in that place with him, not as memory, but as root. The key turned in the lock with the comforting sound of routine. Juanita entered the house slowly, as if she didn't want to break the atmosphere that still enveloped her since the gym. The smell of the place, the warm light coming from the porch, the light creaking of the door closing behind her. Everything seemed more alive. There was a different silence now, no longer the silence of absence. It was a silence that welcomed. She left her coat hanging, went to the kitchen, and put water to boil. She made chamomile tea without thinking, like someone repeating a ritual learned over time. But instead of going to the living room armchair, she went up the stairs, tea in hand, and entered the back room, the one she used as storage for what she didn't have the courage to throw away. She started going through the shelves. She wasn't looking for anything specific. Maybe she just wanted to continue opening internal doors, physical and emotional. It was then that she found a blue fabric box with a white ribbon around it. She recognized it immediately. It was her personal notebook from the 90 seconds. She had stopped writing in it shortly after the birth of their third child. At the time, life had become too chaotic. Michael traveled constantly, commitments overlapped, and she was always between diapers, phone calls, and canceled dinners. She sat on the floor, resting her back against the bed. The tea steam rose slowly. She opened the notebook. The first page had a phrase she herself had written in her slanted handwriting. "Sometimes, the deepest way to love someone is to continue seeing who he is, even when the world only sees what he does." She smiled. Even back then, she knew. She leafed through slowly. Loose notes, feelings captured between dates, small daily frustrations. She rarely mentioned Michael directly, but he was in everything. Until, between 2 pages stuck by time, she found something she didn't remember keeping there. A note written in childish handwriting. She recognized it immediately. It was from Marcus, the middle child. "Mom, if you're sad, it's because Dad doesn't know how beautiful you are. But I know, and I think he knows too. He's just shy to say it." Juanita brought her hands to her mouth. She stayed like that, motionless, with tears in her eyes and her heart tight with tenderness. Marcus must have been 7 or 8 years old when he wrote that. He probably saw her crying and hiding, on one of those days when she tried to pretend everything was fine. And even being a child, he saw the sadness, he saw the silence, he saw the love. And now, so many years later, she understood. The children knew. They always knew. Not the details, but the intensity. The way he looked at her when he saw her laughing with the boys. The way he calmed down just having her nearby. The moments when his voice softened when saying, "Jay, come lie here with me for just 5 minutes." They saw everything, even when they pretended to be sleeping, even when their parents thought they were hiding. She closed the notebook. She pressed Marcus's note against her chest. Then, she decided to do something she hadn't done for a long time. Respond. She went to the desk, got paper and pen. She wrote to her son, but maybe also to herself. "Dear Marcus, I found your letter, and you were right. Your father knew, yes. He just didn't know how to say it. But I read between the lines. And now, you helped me hear with my heart what his mouth never managed to say." She folded the paper, kept it in the same notebook, next to the page where she once wrote, "Love is not what is said. It's what remains present, even when everything else falls silent." That night, she called Marcus. "Son? Hi, Mom. Do you remember when you wrote me a note and put it in my notebook?" Silence on the other side. And then, an embarrassed laugh. "You found that?" "My God, I found it. I was just a child, but you saw me better than many adults. It was easy to see you, Mom. Not always. It was, yes, Dad was just afraid of the size of the love he felt. Yes, maybe he was. Marcus hesitated, then asked, "Do you still miss him?" Juanita didn't answer immediately. "I think I don't miss him. I miss what he was, only with me. And, from that, I never managed to say goodbye." On the other side of the line, Marcus was silent, and then said, "Then maybe he never said goodbye to you either." Juanita closed her eyes, breathed deeply. She didn't know, but in that instant, her love was no longer longing. It was permanence, without pain, without guilt, just presence. On Tuesday morning, the doorbell rang. It was too early for visits, and Juanita wasn't expecting anyone. She opened the door cautiously. On the other side, an elderly man, beige hat, reading glasses hanging around his neck. He carried a thick envelope in his hands and seemed uncomfortable, like someone who had rehearsed that moment for too long. "Mrs. Vanoy?" "Yes, that's me. Sorry to bother you. My name is Harold. I was your ex-husband's personal assistant for almost 20 years. Juanita remained silent. She observed the man as if wanting to confirm if he was telling the truth without needing documentation. He continued, "I waited a long time to come here. But there's something that belongs to you. And I kept it until I was sure it was the right time." He extended the envelope. She hesitated. She took it carefully. "What is this?" "A letter. Written by him. It was never sent. It was written right after the separation. But he gave up. He said, 'You deserved more than words.'" Juanita felt the ground spin. "Why did you keep it?" she asked, with a choked voice. "Because I thought he would regret it if I didn't keep it. And I would regret it if I never delivered it." She nodded. "Thank you, Harold. He talked about you with a reverence he rarely used with anyone. And it wasn't just talk. It was in the way he looked out the window after a victory. It was in the way he fell silent when he saw a blue dress. He would say, "Looks like the one she wore in '97. Juanita couldn't take it. The tears fell before she could stop them. "Thank you for coming." "Really?" Harold smiled, with humility. "He never forgot you, ma'am. He just didn't know how to come back." And then he left, leaving only the envelope in her hands. Heavy like a full heart, she sat at the living room table. She put water for tea to boil, but forgot to go back to the kitchen. She stayed there, motionless, observing the paper. Her name was written on the front, J. She opened with trembling hands. The handwriting was familiar, slightly slanted. Like everything about him. "Juanita, I tried to write this letter so many times I've lost count. And I always stopped halfway. Not for lack of things to say, but because I never found the right words to give you back what I took without realizing. The lightness. I was bitter sometimes. I was absent almost always. And I was cowardly when I most needed to be transparent. But I want you to know that my admiration for you never passed. Not even on days when I thought silence was easier. You were the center of the little that still remained of my humanity. When the world applauded me, you were the only one capable of seeing when I was on the verge of collapse. And instead of running away, you stayed. Silent, present, strong. I miss hearing you breathe beside me at night. I miss even the sound of your irritated steps around the house. I miss being the man who, at least once, made you laugh for real. If this letter ever reaches you, forgive me for not saying it before. I saw you, and I loved everything I saw." She pressed the letter to her chest, closed her eyes, and, in that instant, she didn't feel pain. She felt recognition. Later, that same night, she walked to the porch with a blanket over her shoulders. It was cold, but the sky was clear. She looked at the stars and whispered, without expecting an answer, "Thank you for not forgetting me. Now I can rest too." Juanita woke up with the note still under her pillow. She spent the night mentally rereading each line of Michael's letter. Not because she wanted to memorize it, but because she couldn't stop inhabiting it. It was like a place where, for the first time in many years, she felt whole, even if only in thought. While preparing breakfast, she thought about Marcus, about his childhood note, about the precocious maturity with which he saw the world. But that day, it was Jasmine who called first. "Hi, Mom. Did you sleep well?" "I don't even know. It was a different night." I received a visit yesterday. Someone from the family? No. Someone from the past. An assistant of your father's. Harold. There was a pause on the other side of the line. And he said something? He gave me a letter. Written by your father right after the divorce. It was never sent. Jasmine didn't respond immediately. He wrote to you? He wrote like someone who wanted very much to talk, but didn't have the courage to open up. He was never good at that, right? Juanita smiled. No. But this letter is different. There are things there that I needed a lifetime to hear. Mom, can I come over today? Of course. Can you show me the letter? I can. Hours later, Jasmine arrived. She wore a gray sweatshirt, hair tied in an undone bun, curious eyes and careful. She sat at the kitchen table, crossing her arms like she did in adolescence when she wanted to understand something without showing herself too vulnerable. Juanita placed the letter on the table. Her daughter didn't touch it immediately. You've read it more than once, right? I lost count. Jasmine breathed deeply and took the paper. She read slowly. Her eyes teared discreetly, but her face remained serene. When she finished, she didn't speak for a while. She just kept the letter between her hands. He loved you, Mom. We knew. You knew? Jasmine nodded. I remember one night. I was about 10, maybe 11 years old. You were sleeping in the room. He stayed in the dark living room, sitting on the sofa, with a glass of wine in his hand. I didn't know if I could enter, but he saw me and said, Mommy is stronger than me. She carries the whole house without making noise. Juanita was silent. Her daughter's words fell like a key turning in a forgotten door inside her chest. And then he said, she's the type of person who loves even when left alone. And that kills me. One. One. Her mother lowered her eyes, moved. He never told me that, but he told me. And I never knew if I should tell. Juanita touched her daughter's hand. It was meant to be now. The two stayed there, in silence, one looking at the other, neither trying to force comfort. It was one of those moments that don't ask for words, just presence. After a few minutes, Jasmine spoke. I always thought he didn't show affection because he didn't know how. But now, I think he just didn't know where to put so much feeling without losing himself. He got lost easily, said Juanita. But, deep down, he found you in everything, sometimes. That's what kept me standing. Jasmine smiled. Do you want me to keep this letter with you, Mom? No, I want you to have a copy. Because this here isn't just mine. It's from everyone who saw this love happen and survive even in silence. Later, before leaving, Jasmine went back alone to the living room. Juanita found her standing in front of a shelf. In her hand, an old picture frame with a black and white photo. The two still young, holding hands, laughing in a corridor backstage at a game. He really liked this photo, said Jasmine. How do you know? Once I saw him looking at it, alone, with lowered eyes. He said, that day, I knew I was loved by someone who wanted nothing in return. Juanita leaned against the wall, with moist eyes. I almost threw this photo away once. Good thing you didn't, Mom. Because now I understand. Understand what? That your love was too big to fit inside a marriage. That's why it was left over. That's why it still exists. Juanita didn't respond. She just hugged her daughter. They stayed like that for long minutes. There was nothing to say. Because, in that embrace, two generations understood together what it means to love someone forever, even without a happy ending. Morning came with a white and thick sky, typical of days that seemed to exist only for us to withdraw inside. Juanita woke up without rush. There was no longer urgency, neither to hide what she felt, nor to run from what had been. She went down the stairs like someone crossing another life. She rested her hands on the living room table, looking at the envelope of Michael's letter still there, on the wooden rest. She didn't want to reread it. She wanted to keep what she felt when she read it, and carry forward only that. But something inside her, a new impulse, perhaps the freedom after acceptance, asked for paper, asked for pen, asked for words that were no longer about him, but about her. For the first time in many years, Juanita was going to write not to relive, but to free herself. She went to the desk, took a still-wrapped notebook, a gift from Jasmine, on her last birthday. On the cover, just the title in gold, "For What Has Not Yet Been Said." She opened it. Blank page. She breathed deeply. She began, "Michael, this is not a love letter. Not because I stopped loving you, but because I learned that love also needs to be silent when it has already said everything it could. I lived with you the most intense and silent days of my life. I saw you be a hero to the whole world. But inside our house, I saw the man. I saw your fears, your contained fury, your insecurity of a boy lost in a body too strong. I loved all of that. I don't regret it. But now I understand that loving is also accepting that not every love is destiny. Some are passage, others, teaching, and you were both. I didn't forget you, but I don't wait for you anymore." She stopped. Her hands still held the pen, but her chest was light, like she hadn't felt since the day he left for the last time through that house door without looking back. She folded the letter. She didn't put it in an envelope. She just closed the notebook and kept it in the top drawer, the same where before was their picture together. Now, only silence inhabited there. A good silence. That night, Juanita went to the kitchen and prepared her favorite dinner, something she hadn't done since the separation. A simple ritual, but full of symbolism. She was cooking for herself, by herself. With herself, she lit a candle, put on an old record. Bill Withers, "Ain't No Sunshine When She's Gone." She smiled. This time, she really smiled. Not because it didn't hurt anymore, but because now, finally, the pain had transformed into memory and memory into strength. Before sleeping, she went to the porch. She looked at the sky, like so many other times, but something was different. She was no longer looking for him in the stars. Not in letters, not in photos, not in recordings. She carried him like one carries a perfume, invisible, but present, intimate, but discreet, part of herself, but no longer the center. And she whispered only, "Now I can go," without leaving the place. Autumn came with its warm colors and soft sounds. Juanita opened the windows early, let the fresh air in. Through the garden, golden leaves covered the stone path, as if time wanted to color the traces she had been leaving around the house in recent months. Routine returned, but not like before. Now, there was a new peace. A quiet that didn't depend on absences or presences. She prepared coffee and sat at the table with a small black-covered notebook. It was the same where, years ago, she had noted recipes, plans, and thoughts for the children. Now, she would write something different. A dedication, not to Michael, but to herself. She opened to the first page and, with slow and firm handwriting, wrote, "To the woman who loved without being seen, but who never stopped seeing what was real. To the woman who endured silences and still chose love. To the woman who didn't need to forget because she learned to continue. To me, with tenderness, Juanita." She closed the notebook. She held it to her chest for a moment. And then, with light hands, went to the living room shelf. There, where before there were only forgotten objects, she organized a small, personal altar. No candles, no portraits, just the notebook, the cassette tape, and the letter that was never sent. Not as a sanctuary of pain, but as a reminder. She lived a deep love, and survived it. Later, she decided to walk through the neighborhood. She passed old houses, trees that knew her shadow since before the children were born. When she reached the corner of the school where she took Marcus and Jasmine, she stopped. There, years ago, she saw him for the last time before the separation. Michael, standing by the car, looking at the children through the rearview mirror. She approached and said, "Are you coming back today?" He answered, "Not today, but soon." And he never came back. But now, years later, standing in the same place, Juanita understood that he didn't lie. He did come back, yes. He came back in silences. He came back in unsent letters. He came back in the children's voices. He came back inside her, and remained not as a wound, but as part. On the way home, She picked some leaves from the garden. She made a simple bouquet. Put it in the center of the table. The afternoon sun entered through the windows, as it always did. But now she was there completely, without waiting for him to arrive, without wishing he would explain. Just there, present. She lit the lamp on the left side of the bed. She smiled. And, for the first time, in a long time, she slept dreaming of herself, of the woman who survived a love so big that even after everything, never stopped being her home.